This is the Greg Bedard Patriots Podcast with Nick Cattles.
We're going to dig into the 56-man roster. Let's start with the edge and the end position. I don't know if you have too many surprises. Maybe you have one surprise having to do with Anthony Jennings, but kind of go through that and what your thoughts are about edge and end.
Okay, so on my previous version, I had released Henry Anderson because I just didn't have enough spots. But now with the 56-man roster, he's one of the guys that that I'm going to keep on the roster because, you know, they really don't have a backup to Dietrich Wise on what he does in terms of, you know, sort of base end opposite Matthew Judon, long guy, can play the run. They don't have many. And Anderson plays the run well. They don't have many guys who do that. So Anderson is on. Anthony Jennings is a guy that we're still trying to figure out, and I think the Patriots are. Like, where does he fit? You know, we've seen him at end. We've seen him at linebacker. Like, they have a lot of linebackers. You know, at the end of the day, I just don't see a spot, you know, on the roster for him. And, you know, and even when you move over to tackle, you know, I don't think there are a lot of surprises. I mean, I kept Guy, Godchow, Barmore, and Carl Davis. Now, you know, could Carl Davis or Ekawale, who I think Ekawale, did I see a report that he's going to be suspended for a game or two for PEDs? So he might be not long for this roster. But I don't think, with the way the Patriots are playing, the way they look like they're playing in camp, they're going to have one, on base defense, they're going to have one stand-up guy, so that's Judon. Then they're going to have two interior guys to start. That's Guy and Godchow. And then they're going to have an end like Dietrich Wise, Henry Anderson. They're not going to have a quote-unquote outside linebacker. I think they're going to go with a four-man line like that, probably two or three linebackers beyond that. And then, you know, of course, the safeties get into that mix. But I don't think there are any huge surprises up front. The linebacker is a place where it gets complicated.
Before we get to linebacker, just a couple things on the line. You know, it really does highlight what we've talked about throughout this offseason, the dependability for Belichick on the second-year free agent class and his young guys. I mean, you look at the edge, it's a Judon, second-year guy. It's Uche, Perkins, who are, you know, still young guys, and it's Anderson, another second-year guy. You look at the tackle position, Godchow, second-year guy, Barmore, who's going to be, you know, in his second season, young guy. I do want to ask you about Barmore, since you just kind of laid out Guy, Godchow, Judon. How much does Barmore play this year? And, you know, how do you see him moving forward, being an impact player on that defensive front?
Yeah, it's tough for me at this point to say he's going to be an every down guy. I mean, I don't really know who he replaces. I mean, you know, could it be? I could see a scenario, Nick, where maybe he's sharing time a little bit more with Lawrence Guy to keep Guy fresh. You know, he's getting up there in years. He's played a lot of snaps for this team. I think he's a guy that maybe wore down as the season went on. So maybe if they could find more of a rotation between Guy and Barmore inside. But, you know, Barmore's going to have to prove that he can two-gap and stay in there and defend the run better. I mean, I don't think he was bad. And they didn't ask him to do it a ton, but that's what they're going to need to see.
All right, let's jump to the second level. Linebackers, how are we feeling? What are we looking like?
So to me, based off what the Patriots have done, I think it's pretty clear that Bentley and McMillan are going to be the starters inside. You know, to me, Cam McGrone and Mac Wilson are sort of the next level. Could one of those guys replace one of the guys in front of them? Yeah, it could be. I have a tough time seeing that. I still think McGrone's working his way back from this injury. I don't think he's at full strength. We'll see. Maybe I'm wrong on that. Mac Wilson, it's just a question of his athletic ability is off the charts, and we've talked about him before. I think that you do see him on the practice field sort of thinking his way through things, which is normal in a new scheme. But the quicker he gets the scheme, the more impactful he's going to be. And I think he has a chance to be the next sort of starter up there. I would love it if he replaces Juwan Bentley at some point, but I don't know if that's going to happen. And, you know, that leaves out Lange and Tavai are two guys that the Patriots love. I would love to find spots for them, but, you know, it's tight.
It's very tight. And when you look at linebacker, really, I think you know what you're getting from Jawan Bentley. There's no doubt about that. I think when you look at Mac Wilson, it's rather obvious that he has a higher ceiling for this particular defense and what they want to do and how they play than, Winovich did. So that trade makes a lot of sense. Really, you just need one of McMillan, McGrone, or Wilson to pop. If one of those three guys pop and you get the kind of the steady, if unspectacular play from Jawan Bentley, then you feel pretty good at the second level. You just need one of those three guys to show up and really pop for you. And I think the chances are pretty good that at least one of those three guys will play well enough to give you something there. And there's always, the Dante Hightower stuff that will continue to float until he decides to retire officially or, sign elsewhere, which I think it's just retire or play for the Patriots one more season. Let's look at the secondary here. Cornerback, we already kind of hit. Malcolm Butler goes to the practice squad. You've got Jonathan Jones, Terrence Mitchell, Jalen Mills. They're on the team. Marcus Jones, Jack Jones just drafted. So they're obviously on the team. And what it comes down to is you picking up Shaun Wade over Malcolm Butler. And you really explained why earlier. Anything to add to that, or we're good to move on?
No, and that release is, Juwan Williams, and I don't think there's any shock. I mean, Nick, I went back and do you know that Juwan Williams started the playoff game against the Bills? I didn't. I guess I had forgotten that or blocked it out of my memory, but yeah, that happened.
We all wanted to forget it. Let's look at safety. I mean, if there's one spot that I feel pretty good about, it's safety. I mean, you've got Devin McCourty, you've got Adrian Phillips there, two solid, dependable, consistent veteran guys. Kyle Duggar, I think all of us really expect that third-year leap from him. And then you've got the wild card in Jabril Peppers, who is, athletic coming off of an injury, but he's kind of an interesting guy. Miles Bryant, Joshua Bledsoe, last year's sixth round pick, I think. And then you've got Brennan Schooler, who's a UDFA. All of those guys cut. How you feeling about safety, Greg?
Yeah, I mean, I really do not like releasing Miles Bryant. He was a guy I talked about last year, and they did release him, and they signed him to the practice squad, and he eventually made it back on the team, and he was out there against the Bills. Once he was the slot corner once Jonathan Jones went down. I think that Marcus Jones sort of replaces Miles Bryant. Joshua Bledsoe is a kid who, he has shown well in the offseason this year, and I'm intrigued, but I mean, they have four really good linebackers. I mean, do they keep an extra one like a Bledsoe, anticipating maybe McCourty walks away after this season? It's possible, but I think you're hoping to get a guy like Bledsoe, there's no film out there on him, that you can get him to the practice squad and continue his development. Miles Bryant could even come back to the practice squad. Great group. I wish I could keep more of them.
Yeah, safety is one of the deepest positions on this team, and you actually feel pretty good about looking at that group. You feel pretty confident in what they can do. And we've also talked about the idea of Marcus Jones playing that Tyrann Mathieu kind of role, the Honey Badger. He's not the Honey Badger, but kind of a knockoff version from him, so to speak. So he also can slide back there and do some things. All right, let's jump to offense. I don't think we need to spend a lot of time at quarterback. We've got Mac, obviously, as QB1, Hoyer, and then we've got Bailey Zappi making the team. So Zappi's obviously on as the third guy, which should not surprise anybody, given that he was drafted as high as he was, given the circumstances. Let's go to running back, because running back is a really, really interesting position. We talk about safety being deep. I'd say running back is pretty damn deep as well. In our prior conversations, Greg, you had Damien Harris as one of those guys who could be dealt. Mm-hmm. This time around on your 56, you have Harris staying and not being traded.
Yeah, he's one of the guys who came back to the roster due to the 56-man roster. And I still think that trading Damien Harris is in the realm of possibility, very much in the realm of possibility for this team this year. It's all going to depend on what they see out of Kevin Harris. Do they think he is capable of being Ramondre Stevenson of last year? If they do that, then why wouldn't you entertain, getting something for Damien Harris now, who's going to be a free agent? I would love to have Damien Harris here. If he's going to take a below rate, I'm not paying running backs. So if he wants to take a below market rate contract, fine. Would love to sign him to an extension. I don't think that's really going to happen. So if you think Kevin Harris is going to be Ramondre Stevenson a year ago, then you trade Damien Harris and you go with Stevenson as your lead back, Harris as your backup, and sort of James White, Pierre Strong as your pass backs, and you're good with that. Yes, you're cutting J.J. Taylor and I like the kid, but he hasn't taken the next step yet. And I'm sure he'll be a preseason hero. He's the type of guy who always shows out. Maybe that generates some interest, and you might be able to flip him for a late round pick. But there's just too many good backs on this team if the rookies show that they're ready to play.
Yeah, I mean, you go back a couple of years ago, I was the guy on the pod that was screaming and standing on the table to give Damien Harris the football, give him the football. I love Damien Harris, but then Ramondre Stevenson happened. And so, there's some leeway there. We talk about some depth. There's some depth there. Speaking of depth, wide receiver, it sounds really weird to say that with the Patriots. I'm not telling you they have a, crazy, spectacular, unbelievable ceiling here, but you've got actual legitimate NFL receivers, Greg, on this roster. You've got Devontae Parker, Nelson Aguilar, Kendrick Bourne, Jacoby Myers, Tyquan Thornton. So those are the guys that I don't think would surprise anybody making this roster. The one that might surprise some people, Trey Nixon. You've got Nixon making the team. You've got Montgomery, Wilkerson, and Perry getting cut. I don't think we need to talk about N'Keal Harry. We know he's gone. So why did you make Nixon the guy to be on this roster in that final spot?
Yeah, I just think that, he earned it with what he's done this offseason to this point. We'll see once the pads go on and there's, more competition, does he continue to show a really good relationship with Mac Jones and things like that. To me, it's between Trey Nixon and Ty Montgomery in terms of inside, sort of can give you some slot snaps, inside-outside versatility. You can run end arounds. So, to me, it's just Nixon's shown me more to this point.
Jacoby Myers, any thought about maybe if Nixon continues to pop, is he expendable? Can he get you a pick? We know his contract situation. He just signed his tender, but any thought about maybe moving on from Jacoby if you see enough from Trey and even Tyquan Thornton?
Yeah, I mean, I love Jacoby and he's valuable, but the Patriots need to get more explosive, and Jacoby's just a strictly a possession receiver. He's not gonna bust any huge plays for you. It took him forever to get his first career touchdown. I would be willing to sort of move on from his cap hit and go with a guy like Trey Nixon, because you're going to go with you have Parker right now. You have Parker, Aguilar, Bourne. Thornton. We'll have to see what kind of snaps he gets. I mean, I don't think if the offseason is any indication, I don't think he's targeted for regular snaps, more of like a shot play type of guy to start as a rookie. But we'll have to see how that goes.
All right, tight end. Don't think we need to spend a ton of time here. Kind of self-explanatory. Hunter Henry, Jonnu Smith, Devin Asiasi, who sometimes you could forget is on this team because of Henry and Smith. And Dalton, yep. I mean, this is the year. Dalton Keene has to do something. He was banged up again in minicamp. So those are your four tight ends. Again, self-explanatory. Let's jump to the offensive line. Let's start with tackle, because I think one of the more interesting conversations we've had is Isaiah Winn throughout the last couple of months here. You've got Trent Brown, Justin Herron, and Yadni Kajust being your tackles. You've cut Andrew Stuber, and people might notice the name that I did not mention was Isaiah Winn, because, Greg, you've had enough. You are ready to ship him out of Foxborough.
Yeah, I'm done with Isaiah Winn. I mean, that he thinks that like the offseason's optional for a guy like him. I mean, it's a joke. And look, yes, he can not show up, but I can also react, and the team can also react and just be like, you got to be kidding me. I mean, I'm not paying that guy $10.5 million for the season. A guy who, shows up and when he wants to and thinks he's accomplished. This is 2 years running of this stuff. And so I'll take whatever I can get to move his salary. I'm doing it as soon as possible. And I'm going with 3 tackles. I haven't seen Stuber yet, so that might change. He wasn't at any of the offseason stuff. But I went with 3 tackles. Normally you go with 4, and you go with 4 or 5 on the inside. I went with 3 tackles because I count Micah Wenu as a tackle that, he could be the starting right tackle. Say they do trade Isaiah Winn. You move Owenu to right tackle where he's been at his best, and you find somebody else to play guard.
Yeah. And, the rest of the offensive line, Andrews, Owenu, Cole Strange, Yasir Durant. Cody Rusi, you mentioned you think he's got the best chance to make this roster as a UDFA. Chasen Hines is somebody who interests me a lot. Maybe he'll end up being a practice squad guy. He's a late round pick. Maybe you slip him out of that. You said goodbye to Ferentz. And, we've talked about Darrell Williams, and maybe Williams will play a role in this whole thing. And maybe, Andrew starts off slow. Maybe he's not starting the season. Overall, looking at this 56-man roster, Greg, what I would say is going into training camp, I like the depth in a number of spots. I actually like the depth at the quarterback position, running back, wide receiver, tight end, safety. And then you kind of get into what we talked about, trying to figure out the trenches. How's the offensive line going to play? How's Matt Patricia going to do there? Some of the play calling stuff. And the front seven on the defense, again, you need one of those linebackers to pop for you. And you need Gotchow to show up this year and be what you thought he was going to be. But really, I don't think this roster is as bad as some people might paint it. I'm not as down on this team just yet as maybe some people are, because, if you do get one or two things to work in your favor, you feel pretty good, at least on the field. The coaching stuff, we'll see how that plays out. But I do like some depth in some of these spots, Greg.
Yeah, I agree with you. I do wonder, to tie it back to what we started off with the Celtics, I do wonder, the big question is their depth ready to play big moments like against, is it too young because of the draft miscues? Like, are they not ready? Do they not have the next level of depth developed enough to compete against the Buffaloes and even, the Miamis in the division and, the whole AFC North, the Ravens and teams like that? They do have some nice pieces. I agree with you, and I do agree with you. To me, I think the season is going to come down to the trenches, both the offensive line and the defensive line. I think they're still huge. I like sort of what they've done at linebacker and edge. I like their pieces at cornerback and safety, but the trenches, can they hold up against the run? Can they run the ball well enough? Can they protect Mac Jones? To me, I don't know. I think those are the biggest questions about this team.